Welcome back. I'm Laura Beamer. We're sitting here with Ken Sanders, and we just finished talking about the casting process, and now I want to get into the grittiness of producing. So when you first started producing films back in the 90s, what is the difference for women in producing? Are there more women now than there were then?
Yeah, there probably are more now, although I have to say, even back in the 90s, you know, those sort of gender barriers, I think, had started to come down or were down. I mean, there always have been terrific and strong female producers since the time I started in the business. I've worked with women in just about every position behind the camera. The line producer, in fact, my line producer at Shadowland happens to be a woman. She's terrific, Marianne Wunsch. She's been with us for a few years. I've worked with camera operators, ACs, ADs, production designers, and just about any position you can think of locations people behind the camera. I've worked with women and certainly even directors as well. I've even worked with a couple of female grip and electrics. I mean, I think if there's one sort of position on the crew or one sort of department, the G&E department, the grip and electric department, does tend to be predominantly male, and that I still find is pretty much true. I don't think there's any intentional barrier there, but I think it just men tend to gravitate for whatever reason to that more than women do. And maybe that'll probably change over time. No, I see my crews are very often very heavily female in just about every department.
So if you had to give words of advice to students, women in particular, or men too, that are just about to enter the industry, what are some tips you'd give them so that they can jumpstart their career now?
I think the most important thing is to get experience, and to get experience any way that you can. If that means going out and making your own little project to showcase your talents, then do that. If that means becoming an intern, becoming an apprentice, volunteering to work with someone, whatever you need to do to get that experience and to get access to people who are in the business. I had to do that. I worked a lot of gigs as a young person where I worked for free, and I did it to get access, and I did it to get experience. So I think that go out and do. That is the thing, and make it happen. And once you're there, and once you have access to the people who are in the business, who are making films or making television product or whatever discipline you're thinking of going into, that you're most of the way there.
Was there a specific time in your career when you said, now is the time for me to start my own production company? How did you figure that out?
Well, I sort of always knew that I wanted to run my own business. I had it in the back of my mind, ever since I left college. I didn't know how to do it until I'd been in the business for a while, and I had worked for some production companies and learned from people who were running production companies, and I did my own little sort of apprenticeship over many years, working with a lot of different people, a lot of very talented people who ran successful companies, or and I got in right on the ground floor, or I came in later in the company's life, but nonetheless, I got to learn a lot from that. I kind of always had that entrepreneurial spirit in me, and wanted to be able to run my own show.
Did something happen right before when you opened your own production company, or had you written your own film that you sold and you now had the capital to start your own company?
Well, I had been working as an executive for several years. I worked as an executive at several different rather medium-sized to large companies. I decided at a certain point, at some point I've got to stop being an employee, and I've got to start being the owner of a business who can then partner with people. And so there was a time where that happened. I think it was after about the third or fourth time in my life when the company I was working for, downsized. That happens a lot in this business. And when I was an executive, I got downsized and, taken out of the workforce a few times that way. It's part of the, just growing and learning in this business. Happens a lot. So I did reach a point where I said, you know what, I'm not going to be downsized anymore. I'm going to have my own company, and I'm going to find a way to work with the people I want to work with, as a business partner, as opposed to as an employee. And that meant that I went for a few years without much of a steady income, but I did make that decision at one point. You're very perceptive. I did decide to do that. There was a point where I said, this is it, now or never, and I did it.
Right on. Well, cool. I can't wait to talk about that a little bit more in depth in just a bit.